So now that we know a little bit more about Markdown, we're going to start coding with Python. If you don't already have a Jupyter notebook created, I created one in one of the last few videos called Python_basics. Um, you can, if you don't already have this, you can first go to the launcher and click on this tile called Python 3. It creates a new file here, and you can right click on this and rename it to Python basics. I'm going to delete this because I already have one. If you don't see the launcher here, you can also press this plus sign, which shows the launcher again. So there's many concepts in Python that we should know about before, you know, to learn the fundamentals. Uh, I'm going to switch back to Markdown here and list out some of the things that we'll cover today. Uh, so one of them will be, as this uh, comment suggests, strings and variables. We're going to look at uh, how Python stores data using variables. We're also going to look at types. There's many different data types that Python supports, and we'll, understand how we can figure out what data type uh, specific data is. The other thing that we'll look at is something called F strings. So this is a neat way to output code and text all at the same time. So if you sort of want to calculate, uh, you know, some complex function, but you also want to give it context, and before the answer is outputted, you want to say something like the answer is, and then it outputs the answer. You can do that using F strings. Uh, the other thing we'll look at is con conditionals, right? So conditionals are uh, sort of true false statements, and we'll take a look at these more. So let me just delete these. So I'm going to run this cell, and now, I can see, you know, the things that we just typed. So all of these are code cells apart from this. So the first thing really to understand is how Python stores data. So suppose I want to store my name, right? If I write my name and I just press play, and this is a code cell, it says, it gives me an error because it doesn't understand what uh, these characters mean. If we, because we haven't really assigned anything to it. Um, so what we really have to do if we want to, create text data is wrap it in brackets. I mean, in quotes. So, one thing to keep in mind is either they should both be double quotes or they should both be single quotes. So you can also do this. So if I run this, now I just get this outputted back to me because it understands that this is some piece of data. And you can sort of see that's the case, since the color changed. If I remove the quotes, it's black. And then when I put it back, it's sort of, brownish. If I want to store this piece of data in some place so I can call it over and over again without having to say these exact, without having to write these exact words again, I can create a variable. So a variable is, something we can call it whatever. There are some naming conventions, such as, it can't start with a special character and things like that. But for the most part, you would just keep it simple. So I'm going to say name. And then I'm going to set this equal to the value that I have here, right? So now name is a variable. We're looking at strings and variables right now. So name is a variable and this is a string. So the value that's assigned to name, this variable called name is Kartikeya Sharma. So if I press play now, nothing happened. Well, where is this string now, right? Because last time it outputted right underneath. The answer outputted right underneath. Um, so now that we stored it in a variable, we can call this in any cell. If I type name here, it gives me this output. If I type name here, it gives me the same thing, right? If I delete this, if I delete this cell and I try to call name again, it's going to work right now because um, that variable was saved when we ran it. Um, so let me do something and uh, change its assignment. So I'm going to change this to KS instead of Kartikeya Sharma. If I run this now, it's KS instead of Kartik. So if I call name again, what do you think would print here? Would it be the same as what we're seeing here right now, or would it be KS? So yes, it would be KS because we reassigned the value of name to be KS. So that's really the basics of strings and variables. It's how you can store the way you store strings and certain pieces of data is by assigning it to variables. I can also rename this variable to uh, initials, right? Because now it's not really my name, it's my initials. So if I run this, you know, and if I type initials here and I run this, I get KS. So you can see how we can create variables on the go and we can reuse these as we want. Another important thing to uh, learn is, let me switch back to a code cell, is data types. So Python has many data types. Um, if I search, if I want to find the type of initials, so what really the question I'm asking is, what is the data type of the variable initials? Okay. So the way I can, ask Python that through code is with this syntax. You see type is a special word, right? It's green. It's colored green. Initials is something that we invented. Uh, so if I run this, I get str, which stands for string. So Python has, many data types, as I just said. A few of them are uh, Python data types are strings or str. These are your words, your, free form text, things like that. We also have integers. Into, if I can spell it correctly. Okay. Which is abbreviated as int. So let me change this, the value of initials to something like 3, whatever. If I press play, by the way, I just changed the value here. You see how there's a little dot here, which means that something changed in the cell, but we haven't updated the code, which means we didn't press the play button. Because if I run initials again here, it's going to say KS because we didn't really run the cell yet. So always make sure to run the cell whenever you update any piece of the code. So if I run this, now it's not, there's no yellow dot here anymore. If I run initials again, I get the number 3. So what do you think the type would be for initials? Would it be a string? So now initials is of type int, which is an integer. So these are just numbers, right? Um, something related is uh, are floats. So float, I'm not sure how this is abbreviated, but floats are, uh, numbers with decimals. So if so again, I didn't run this cell. I updated the number 3 to 3.0 and it's, yellow. So make sure to run it. So now I ran it. And if I check the type of this, it's a float. All right, so there's no abbreviation for float, it's just float. Something else, some other data types that we also have, which are pretty common are uh, Booleans. Um, Booleans are just true false statements. So I can have something be true or I can have something be false. Remember that the T and F in true and false are capitalized. If I don't capitalize it, you see how it doesn't light up. So it Python thinks that this is some variable. So if I want it to be a type, I have to make capital F. So if I run this now and I check the type, it's going to be of type bool, which stands for Boolean. And these are really just true or false. Some things can be true, some things can be false. And one of the other data types that we have, and it's a little more, less intuitive and, you know, it might not make sense at first, but they are very useful is lists. So lists are, uh, these are groupings of different, these are groupings of data types. These are groupings of data, really. That's what they are. So the way, for example, initials at the moment, it only stored one uh, false statement, right? What I can do is I can open up a square bracket and I can have many different statements, right? This is useful when you're dealing with many different, for example, if we have 5 people, right? Um, let's go back to the initials case. If we have 5 people and their initials are KS, uh, LJ, AK, SF, DA. So imagine these are the initials of 5 people. If I run this, we didn't get any errors, which means, Python recognizes what we just did. But what did we actually do? Uh, we we already know that this is the data type of this specific uh, data is a string, right? That's the example we looked at in the first case. And this is also a string, and this is also a string, and this is also a string, and this is also a string. But what is initials? What is the data type for initials? This whole thing. Notice we wrapped everything around in square brackets. So If I run this, it's going to give me a data type of list. So list is a special data type which groups, a bunch of data. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same data type. For example, I can have a false here. I can also have the number 3.0 here. We have mixed data types here, but the overall data type for initials is still going to be a list. Okay. So, those are two important things to remember really is, how do we store data by using variables? And you must also understand the data types because, especially with data science, um, you can't really do any statistical analysis with, text like this. You can't find the standard deviation of, AK, but you can find the standard deviation of a bunch of floats and integers. So when you have a large data set, it makes sense to first, um, you know, do some sort of reconnaissance on it, meaning you understand the overall data set, by looking at what are the different data types, what sort of analysis can I do on it, and things like that.